Everyone, welcome. I'm just going to start today by reminding councillors to use their microphones. There has been the odd occasion where the pearls of wisdom have not been recorded for posterity on the live streaming, and so therefore if people before they start speaking could just press their microphone button, and that way we will be able to preserve all those great contributions that are made. I have apologies from Councillor Livingston for temporary absence, who will be representing the council at the funeral of Pete Mason, and Phil Clearwater as an apology for early departure, and potentially so is Aaron Kewen, depending on the time that the meeting takes, but it's a relatively short agenda. I have a number of declarations of interest which will be recorded on the screen when we get to item 12, council controlled organisations, just for those that are sitting on trusts and boards. Public forum, there were no public forum presentations advised prior to the meeting, no deputations by appointment, no presentation of petitions, and I will move to include the supplementary report in the meeting, which is item 30. Public excluded item 30, insurance renewal, and I'll move that, seconded by Andrew Turner. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And just before I move on to the Capital Endowment Fund application, can I move all of the minutes? And seconded by Andrew. And I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.
Can we just move and second the apologies? Oh no, we've done it. You moved it and Andrew seconded it.
Yeah. That's okay. So now we move. We're just going to deal with an item that Glenn Livingston has an interest in, the Capital Endowment Fund application. So we can deal with that before he leaves. Item 19. So Tony, could I invite you to give a brief overview? Thank you.
Today, this report really asks two key questions of the City Council. Is it better? Which is, should we partner with a Healthy Homes Canterbury service, which I'll talk about what that service is in a moment. And obviously, if we partner in that service, we can then provide whole of home advice. If we do not, then it will be a sales-focused advice that the residents will receive as part of that service. And then the second question is, of course, how much would we contribute to that service should you choose to? And there's three options discussed in the report. What I'd like to do just now is take a moment to talk about the difference between whole of home advice and sales-focused advice, because it's hard to explain that in the report. So I thought if I just give you a sense of what's involved, then you understand what we're talking about and investing in potentially. So for the residents, it takes about 1 hour. An assessor comes to your home. Sales-focused advice first, a big pardon. Sales-focused advice focuses on the features, the benefits, the product. So a heat pump salesperson, for example, will talk about how quiet the heat pump is, the cost of the heat pump, of course, the size you need for your home, the benefits of having a heat pump, they're efficient. They'll talk about the location of that heat pump and talk about the after-sales service for the heat pump. So it's going to describe the benefits of their products and the features that that product has, and then you will be able to access a loan from the regional council to help fund that appliance, but their advice and their focus will be on selling that appliance to the homeowner, which is totally fine, and if you need a heat pump or insulation, fantastic. But we're talking about a different form of advice, which is based on the Build Back Smarter service the City Council is currently running, which will end when this new service starts. And for the last, well, since the earthquakes, really, 2013, we started this service. We've helped about 5,500 homes make their homes warmer, dry and healthier by giving them whole of home advice. It's free advice from an expert, a trained professional. They are qualified in a home performance assessment. That's a course they run. It's a 3-day course, and they also sign an agreement as to how they'll behave. So there's a high level of quality associated with their advice they provide. It's no obligation advice. It's in-home advice. So the person comes to your home and walks around the home with you, looks at all the different aspects of your home and gives you that advice. And then they also write a healthy home improvement plan. So it's a written list of things that you can do to improve the home, and it's a prioritised list that talks about the benefits and the costs of making those interventions. And it's specific to the person and to their home. So it's less about the products and more about the dwelling and the person. That's how Build Back Smarter has run, and this report proposes to continue that type of advice, but to link it to some other financial support that's available. So the advice that we provide through Build Back Smarter covers all of these different aspects, and I just want to take a moment to give you a sense of the sorts of advice that they provide. It's $150 to provide this advice. The assessor is in your home for about an hour, and then another hour to write up the advice and give you those recommendations. So it's 2 hours worth of work from an advisor. So firstly they assess the home, then they give you that verbal advice, and then they write you a written report on all of those aspects. So let me give you some examples of the sorts of things they talk about. They'll talk about draft stopping. And draft stopping is the most important cost-effective way to stop heat loss. And for many homes in Christchurch, the drafts around the windows and doors amounts to about this size of hole in your wall. So it's basically the wind literally blowing straight through your doors and your windows, making your home cooler. Likewise, because our windows are so poor, talking about full-length double layers of curtains, you can increase the room temperature by 2 degrees without adding any heat at all, just by having improvements to your curtains. So they'll talk about how you can do that and the best ways to fit those curtains to your home. They'll talk about the sources of moisture in your home and where you get the moisture from. And because Christchurch largely is built on a swamp, we also get a huge amount of moisture from the ground, which is about 45 litres a day coming into your home. So they'll talk about where the moisture sources come from, and then where that moisture goes, because in the home that goes to wherever it's coldest. So cold places, that moisture will condense, like we said on our windows, but it also condenses inside the walls, the floor, and even in cupboards and in clothing that's in the cupboards. So thinking about where that moisture goes, and then they'll give advice on how to avoid that moisture in the home. The importance of opening windows, the importance of having a plastic vapour sheet on the ground, a plastic layer on the ground to stop the moisture rising out of the soil, and the importance of having ventilation in the kitchen and bathroom to get that moisture out of the home, and obviously not drying your clothes inside, and having unflued gas heaters which produce carbon monoxide as well as moisture for the home. They'll cover all those aspects. They'll also talk about the importance of insulation and minding the gap. Brands have done research that shows that even a 4mm gap, which is tiny, reduces the thermal performance of your insulation by 15%. So they'll look at the condition of your insulation and give you advice around that, both the fit and the depth. Importantly, they'll look at the downlights that many homes have and see if they are actually drawing heat out of the room, because the way that downlights work is they heat up, and because they heat up they act like a chimney and they actually physically suck heat out of the room. But also because they heat up, the insulation needs to be set back from the lights, so you have a gap, a space around the lights. So you're breaking really the thermal performance of that insulation in your home. So they'll give advice around changing those to LED and IC rated lights, which then can be covered with insulation, that you won't have that heat loss from your lounge. The importance of LEDs, you can save $25 a light bulb if you change to LEDs, for example. Wrapping hot water cylinders, again, $80, pays for itself in 1 year. So the importance of just keeping heat in your home and making sure you're just heating the water rather than heating the space around the cylinder. In this case, $80 a year saved. And even just switching off at the wall, turning off appliances at the wall can save $100 a year. And if you're having difficulty reaching around the back of your TV to turn off the switches, you can also have remote controlled switches that actually allow you to switch off the lights remotely. So that's a quick sample of some of the things they'll talk about in your home. And then this is an example of a piece of a healthy home improvement plan. And it lists the actions that are recommended, the benefits of taking those actions, it prioritises them for your home, and then it gives you an indication as to the cost for each of those things for your home. So the person after the assessment has a high level of understanding about what they need to do for their home, about the benefits of making those changes, and then understanding the costs. So, Healthier Homes Canterbury. It's a funding service. It's available to all ratepayers in the region-wide, up to a maximum of $6,000. Homeowners, ratepayers can access a loan from the Environment Canterbury, the Regional Council. It takes a 9-year payback with a fixed interest rate, and it's only one home loan per person, one loan per ratepayer, sorry. So if you're a landlord with multiple properties, you're just allowed one loan. But equally, that one loan has to apply to all of those things you might want to change. So it applies to ceiling, heating appliance, kitchen and bathroom fan, moisture barrier, and draft stopping. Now this is the first time that we've ever had financial support for draft stopping and a moisture barrier and a fan in the home. So this is a unique opportunity for our residents to access this type of funding. Through Build Back Smarter, we managed to achieve 75% of the homes that received the advice took up that advice. They made changes to their homes. And the main reason why they didn't was because of the financial constraints. So this links an advice service to a funding service. But there are other sources of funding as well, not just from the Regional Council. There is also funding available from ECA, that's the government. They're now offering a 75% subsidy for insulation. Trading banks, ANZ, have also offered a zero interest loan for insulation, and we're encouraging other trading banks to do the same. And then there's the curtain bank, of course, from Community Energy Action, where people can access curtains, and then other product discounts. So there's a suite of funding available for people to access. But the key point is, in order for people to access, they need the confidence to be able to access those funds. So the sound advice and the financial support can deliver the highest level of uptake. So that's a quick run through really on the background to this and why we're bringing this to you today. And I'm happy to explore questions you may have, but I understand there's some questions around some finances and details, which I'm happy to reflect on now if that's appropriate.
Yes, that's fine.
So if I could ask you to turn in your reports to the first table, which is table 1. I'll just walk through the table with you.
What page is it on, Tony?
Well,
It's on page 174.
Right.
Does that get you to something that looks like
Yes, it does.
table 1 in the middle-ish of the page?
Yep.
so just what I'd like to do is just walk through the table with you so you understand the sort of breakdown of the costs and where they arise. So in this particular table, we're talking about 1,000 homes per year receiving advice at $150 per home. Now, that's the total of 150,000, of course. We're estimating that the next line down, about 300 people will take up the home loan, about 300. But if they take up the home loan, you can fold into that loan the $150 cost. Or if the provider is selling a heat pump, they may choose to waive that because the heat pump is a large item and they could probably get a discount from the provider because they're dealing with a service at scale. So maybe one of the suppliers would offer that as an incentive. So what we've done there is we've assumed that all 300 will either roll the $150 into a loan or be waived by the provider, which then amounts to $45,000. And then that leaves $100,000, $105,000 remaining. And then we have in our long-term plan allocated $20,000 per year, and that's indicated there. And the next line down is a $50,000 one-off carry forward. So this financial year alone, there's a $50,000 carry forward. The next line is because there's a gap between the financial year end, so June and before the service starts in September, we are still continuing with the Build Back Smarter service, and so the advice is still being given to the residents, and so the cost of paying for that advice that's happening between the two services is $20,000. And so then the bottom line is, topping that up, the Capital Endowment Fund requests along the bottom line 55, 85 and 85 per year, and that then means that the total council contribution per year is listed along the bottom. So that's where those costs, and that's kind of the same for each of the tables and each of the options. All right, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's actually incredibly helpful, and so was your presentation, because I guess what you're saying is that with all of these different financial support options available to people, if they were to get the right advice at the beginning, they'd make some better choices about how they might access those.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I could just add one point, during the Build Back Smarter service provision, we surveyed every year to kind of understand how the service was being received, and one of the comments that we received, which I think I'm going to remember correctly, but Tony will correct me if I haven't, is that people appreciated that the advice was coming from an independent source, and that was something that we heard consistently through the years that the program ran, and so that's another thing that another offer that this provides if the advice service was supported.
Yeah. Sarah.
Thank you. This does look really, really good, and I know Build Back Smarter has been really successful. Two quick questions. Why would someone choose to roll the $150 into the loan when we've already offered to pay it?
So with this particular proposal, we're talking about 1,000 homes receiving the advice.
Yeah.
And so that is made up of the council support and also the loan, the rolling of that money into the loan. So it's a combination of both. So if you choose not to take up the regional council's loan, which we think many people won't,
yeah,
they'll be self-funding the improvements themselves. They'll be putting in the draft stopping or the insulation or whatever it might be on their own.
Yeah. But I thought that $150 was the cost of the advice.
Yes, that's correct.
So if we've offered to pay for the cost of the advice, why would a resident then choose to not accept the $150 and to add that to their loan, if you like?
Yeah. So at the moment, the way the service is structured, it's if you take up the loan with the regional council, you must.
So it's not a choice. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's just a default setting of how it works.
Yes.
Okay.
And that allows us to provide advice to more homes.
Yeah, which is great.
That makes sense.
That's really good.
The
other thing is on 4.9, councillors on page 168. It looks at the level of funding and different options. It says, note all options include a review of the service after 3 years in preparation for a funding proposal to the long-term plan, which is great. What sort of data is being collected? It'd be really good to know how many, not just how many people, but actually what advice they have taken up, not just the number of loans and things, but to have really good data from the outset on actually the types of improvements, the impacts of those, that kind of thing, because it would be really good data to have for a long-term plan bid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
We can add potentially a clause relating to that into the agreement.
That would be really good.
Anne and then Yanni. Jimmy.
Thanks, Tony, for a very clear explanation of the scheme. It's fantastic. I've sat in a house where the wind has been coming through the windows, and it was in a house where a person was English as a second language. So in terms of when the advisor goes into a home to help that person, is that advice, do they stay with the person so that they can explain and talk and take them through? So I think that would be really important.
Yes.
Is that what's done? Yeah. So
yeah, the advisor comes to the home, and in the example you've given of someone who doesn't speak English well, or it might be that there's an elderly person in the home, we do encourage a second person to be in the home to support that person, but the advisor is trained to be careful about how they treat a person, and also even just walking around the home, they don't enter a room where the owner's not there, for example, so they're careful the way they manage the assessments. But yes, the assessor stays in the home for that hour giving them the advice around all the different aspects of improving the home, and then they receive later a written report about the home and the recommendations.
Further to that, so if the person didn't have access to the internet, for example, and in terms of applying for the funding and all those sorts of things, that would be also support was given through that? So
quite often people can just phone in and ask for the service to be delivered to them. Because when we haven't got a lot of money to spend on marketing, nearly all of the Build Back Smarter uptake has been from word of mouth. So people have taken up the service, and then they're telling their friends and family members to use the service. So you can obviously register online, and you can ring up by phone. Are the two main ways to connect.
Can you choose to pay for it yourself?
The assessment?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
You could, and I'm sure that we haven't set that up in the structure here, but yes, you could.
Yeah. Because I mean, it seems to me that if there were some good publicity for this, and maybe even today's the beginning of that, someone like myself, I could afford to pay, so I'm going to ring up and say I'd like to get this service, but yeah. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, some of the stuff I know because I know it. Other stuff, I only picked up about drying inside, which I do all the time. When I went to the Ika home opening, the insulation opening that they did just recently, and it just never occurred to me, because you don't see it happening, that it's so damaging. So now, it's easy just to open a window, but never occurred to me it was such a big issue. Yanni?
Yeah, my understanding, I just want to pick up something that you said, that previously the service was just independent advice. My understanding from previously, because of lack of funding, there were companies that were providing the advice that were also selling the products. Is that correct?
So the way the service is delivered, sorry, I missed that. In Christchurch, we have 3 service providers who give that advice, and one of them is Community Energy Action, another Aircon New Zealand Limited, and then Smart Energy. Energy Smart, I beg your pardon, Energy Smart, who's associated with Te Rālana. So those 3 companies have sent their staff to be independently trained through the Community Energy Network, and then those are now official home performance advisors, and that they've signed some protocols around how they deliver that advice, and those 3 companies then have those staff going to homes giving that advice. So it does sound like a heat pump or an insulation company is coming to your home giving you information around their products, but actually the way the advice is being delivered, it covers all of those aspects I described in a very brand neutral way, and then the homeowner is left with the decision, what would they like to do. It's entirely up to the homeowner. No obligation advice is what we're providing, and then the homeowner then is informed about the different financial supports that are available, and then they can make their choice.
But they don't know that the person's represented in their day job.
They will know.
They will know that.
Yes, it's on their name badge. But
that's not a product that they're left details about.
Correct. So the service we are paying for, through Build Back Smarter, is an advice service from that company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of any evaluation, have we looked at how many people have been assessed, and then what the uptake is in terms of products from which companies?
So in terms of the uptake, we do a customer survey, as Carolyn mentioned before, and the customer survey results were that 90% were satisfied, that 75% of the homeowners that received the advice actually took action in their home, but we didn't go to the detail of, I've got what's recommended to their homeowner, but I haven't got the specifics around what they take up in terms of the purchases they make. Yeah. So that information I don't have, because we're just providing the advice service.
No, I understand that, but just in terms of transparency, if you've got, and I understand why you've done it the way you've done it, but I do think in terms of transparency, that is actually quite important.
Sarah's already raised this as a mechanism for collecting very rich data, and obviously what people take up, linking it to the actual advice that they receive, who they receive it from is going to be a significant part of that.
Correct.
Yeah. Jimmy, then Tim.
Thank you. To patients, First one is on the page 170 in here, particular 5.10, the bullet point 1 and the 2. I just want to know what's the relation there. You pick up the 22%, 30,000 homes, rather than the 51,000 homes, 32%. Because I reviewed the 5.13, you particularly emphasize fully insulated and damp home is much harder and costly to heat. So why you pick up the 22%, only those 30,000 homes,
yes,
rather than 51,000
yes,
homes.
I understand.
Yes.
That's correct. So I was just giving you, so that the piece of the report you're referring to lists a whole lot of different challenges that we're facing as a country in Christchurch.
Yes.
And I just, in the other parts of the report, just referred to the one which is around insulation. But you are right. I mean, moisture and dampness in the homes is a very significant issue for Christchurch, which is listed here. Brands have done research just recently that's come out with assessment for the whole of New Zealand, saying that half of the homes in New Zealand have visible mould in them. Half. So we really have a big problem with our moisture in New Zealand, and this is an indication here. So I didn't want to, in the analysis, I wasn't really digging into all of the different aspects that we could address, but we are going to be addressing all of those aspects of insulation, ventilation, moisture management when we provide this advice.
But if this household, they have request, also would like to, get a advice or service, how can we do? If those one outside of these 30,000 homes.
So the advice service we could provide through this is looking only at 1,000 homes a year. So we do have guides that talk about the ways to warm up your house as well, and we'll revise these with the new branding of the new service. There is also ECA with their Energy Spot advertising on television that talk about the different ways to care for your home. And then there's tools that ECA have on the website too about understanding the different aspects of your home, and there's little videos online that help. So and we are also working through the health boards, so talking about the medical centres and Plunkett and those sorts of groups, getting this information out there so that people understand the ways to make their homes healthier and more energy efficient.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the second question is the page 168. Regarding to the option 1, the figure you emphasized, the overall 3 years is $335,000.
Yes.
Where this figure come from?
Oh, okay. So that would
because if I accumulate, looks like just $295,000. So I'm not sure how to calculate this one.
So the best way to look at the figures is in those tables, and there's 3 tables, one for each option.
Yes.
And that details the where those amounts add up to. And what I've just done on the piece of the report you're looking at is just summarise those for each option. So the 335 is a summary of the table that gives you more details about where the funding and all the money comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Tim?
Thank you. Have we looked at including this in our own social housing, etc.?
So I understand that the City Council is embarking on obviously a repair and rebuild process, and that does include effectively a high standard of living for the dwellings.
Because we also have the housing trust, etc. So
yes,
we have a massive amount of properties. And
yes, so community energy action is being used to insulate those homes. It is part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that program is underway, but also in addition they've also included LifeMark standards in there too, so that the dwellings are not just healthy in terms of energy, but they're also good to use in terms of the life stages of people.
It'd be good to know those numbers. So I was at a meet your councillor session at Riccarton Mall the other day, and there was a social housing tenant who obviously hasn't been included in that at this stage, but I guess it's obviously going to take time to get through them all, but that should be the priority for those people who are actually those areas most in need, and it's our own. It seems ridiculous in some respects. I realise that, but it seems a bit slow.
Anyone else? Pauline?
Add to Sarah's request about the data that it is about well-being, but it's also these initiatives are about reducing the cost on our health system at the end of the day. So do we have any way to access, without breaching any privacy acts, but if people are actually finding after a while that they're going to the doctor less often and things like that?
Yes. So there was some work that, well, I'm not sure of the year, sorry, but it was a few years ago. There was some work done with Community Energy Action where they worked with the DHB to invest insulation into homes that where people regularly turned up to the doctors. So they invested $1 million into homes, and in that same year, because of people not turning up to the doctor and not actually needing a night in hospital, they saved $1 million a year as well. So I think it's about $1,000 a night for a person in hospital. So that person only needs to be in hospital for 2 nights, and you've paid for the insulation of that home, which is effectively what happened. So if you focus on the most vulnerable in our community, you get the biggest benefit. And that's why in this report it talks about a $1 spend, $6 return benefit. Because if you, the elderly, the young, the ill, if they are the ones receiving this, this support, that will dramatically reduce the health costs for the country.
So we're still working with the DHB and sharing that data?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So, Glenn, would you like to move?
Maybe a couple of comments.
Yeah. But
yes,
I want a
move.
resolution on the table.
Yes.
So which option are you moving? You're moving the staff recommendations?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Right. Okay. So moved by Glenn, seconded by Vicky. Right. Glenn.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for allowing this to be first on the agenda so I can attend the funeral. Thank you, Tony, also for one of the most compelling presentations I've ever seen. This is a good example of the joined-up process with our regional council. As you know, it was signalled in the LTP for consideration through the rates-neutral capital endowment fund. The actual quantum per annum is much less than it used to be under the former Build Back Smarter scheme. And we've heard from Tony how it's configured differently now. We have a really sound reputation as a council for the previous scheme and its unfolding through Build Back Smarter. The press wrote a very complimentary editorial at the time, giving a big tick to the council for rolling this out. You can see through the report and the presentation today that the advice, if this wasn't funded, this advice wouldn't happen. Rather, people would be left with hit and miss advice from those who supply insulation. They wouldn't give that comprehensive overall advice. What flies under the radar, but you see it in the report, is the 128 deaths a year. We know about road deaths. We don't know so much about this, but this is part of the reality, and yet on the positive side of the equation, the return benefit, as Tony has just said, is 6 to 1. So I always had a hunch that warmer, drier homes would lead to fewer deaths, less illness, greater productivity in the workplace, greater attendance at school. But this actually, provides a figure 6 to 1. I can hardly think of higher cost-benefit ratios. So I urge your support for this. It's a great thing we can do. The actual quantum isn't much. It's less than what I signalled to you in the LTP process, and would be tremendous if you could support it today.
Phil?
Thank you, Leanne. And thank you, I reiterate what Glenn said, staff. I think the work that has been done has been tremendous, and this proposal is an excellent too. Actually, Glenn Livingston usually reminds us about the importance of housing and warmth and shelter in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this fits this program classically to improve what actually clearly is a really serious situation for our city. And with 30,000 homes and critical need in our city, that's a huge number. And so this program will go a long way towards supporting that. And that whole advice part is clearly crucial for people to understand what we've had the good fortune today to be given a good understanding of quite a difficult, challenging problems from different different airflows, if you like, different perspectives. And as Glenn said, the leverage and payback for this is just tremendous in terms of 6 to 1. It's an excellent investment. And I think having something up which actually for private householders to complement requirements of landlords with new legislation, this makes good sense. And I guess the overall thing too, for everybody's health, is it will lead to a reduction of fossil fuels. That's clear in the report, and that's something that we would all want. Clearly at winter time, when electricity use is at its peak, it's at those times that the Huntly coal-burning power stations are brought on, and that's what we all want to attempt to eliminate. So I certainly support the staff recommendation and what Glenn has said too in supporting that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Carolyn. The next one is the report from the Regulatory Performance Committee, draft dangerous and unsanitary buildings policy. David.
I was away for this, I'll defer to Jamie. He chaired the meeting while I was away.
The floor is yours.
Thanks, David. Well, I'll take it as read, but it's essentially we're essentially passing to go to a special consultative procedure around this. But if staff want to add any more, then Judith, you're free to. But otherwise, take it as read.
Very good. Are there any questions? Sarah?
No. Thanks. I'm just trying to find it again from my notes. In the introduction to the policy itself, it mentions 1.3 on page 54 of our agenda. Act also requires to know which are buildings adjacent to, adjoin, or nearby a dangerous building or dam. The dam isn't really mentioned anywhere else within the policy, and I'm just wondering if that part of the policy affects us at all. Do we have any dams? I just don't see it anywhere else in there when it comes to the affected buildings.
That comes from the definition of affected building, and no, the regional council looks after dangerous dams.
Yeah, I just didn't see it in the definition either.
I think it should be.
It was late when I was reading it, so. But when I went down to the definitions, I was looking in the definition of building.
Yeah, the definition of affected building in 13, which is on page 59 of the agenda, means a building that is at risk of damage or other impact from a dangerous building or dam that is adjacent to, adjoining or nearby. Actually, you having pointed that out, I've just picked up that there's a spelling mistake there. It should be adjoining, not adjoin in 1.3. But
yeah, okay, thank you. That's it.
Is that it? Yep. Yanni?
I was just wondering at a very high level, if staff could just sort of highlight, based on what we've learned through our earthquake experience and our former policy, what changes we've put in place.
in this policy compared to the old,
the
current
given
policy?
that we've been through significant earthquakes and had,
But all the earthquake prone stuff's been taken out because that's in the legislative framework now. So, but you know that. So you're talking about dangerous and unsanitary buildings.
Yeah.
So, and we've got our legal representative at the end of the table. So can you just be a little bit more specific about what you're asking
so
here?
at a high level, obviously the affected buildings is something, I guess, is one key thing that's been picked up. Is there any other things that we've observed over the last, 10 years, for example, or 8 years, that we've put in here or we haven't put in here because we can't?
Yeah, we've got, maybe that's really not a question for our legal advisor. So, I'm not really sure. I'm sort of looking at you, Leonie.
Previously when we've had this policy, we've had quite a lot of workshops and briefings when we developed it, particularly post-earthquake. We just developed it before the earthquake in September. There was a lot of discussion around things like insurance. Now, I know that this is not the earthquake-prone stuff, but things like insurance actually were a significant issue that was discussed last time because of the way in which we deal with things and what that means for property owners.
Okay, so there's nothing in here that deals with insurance, but if a person has a dangerous or unsanitary building that the council's identified and there are insurance issues, that is a matter that the staff dealing with the potential enforcement action would take into consideration in terms of their discretion about what enforcement action they might take. Are there insurance issues? What is the level of dangerousness or unsanitary nature of the building? You know, and are there insurance issues that the person is dealing with?
Yeah. Okay. And just, I guess just the final, and maybe it's more of the chair, the acting chair of that committee, but to do something about buildings that are as is, whereas that are clearly causing concern for local people, and Scarlet Factory in Wolfston is a classic, covered in graffiti, broken windows, overgrown grass. Nothing seems to be being done. Is there anything in this policy or any other work that we're doing as an organisation that means that we can be more responsive given the significant increase in those types of buildings because of as is, whereas?
Yeah, I think similar to what we talked about earlier, Yanni, this probably isn't the place for that, but the SCC touched on that. I think it was at yesterday's meeting, and the Development Forum is going to be looking at that, and there are a range of initiatives, carrots and sticks, around that, and we're investigating exactly what you have just said there, but I don't think this is the place for that. Come to the Development Forum on Monday, though, too, because we will be discussing it if you'd like. I may regret saying that.
Yeah, no, it is, because the development
burnt out
focused
houses.
on CBD.
It's the burnt out houses that sit there for 3 months.
Yes, but we want to apply it widely.
That constantly get vandalised and have arson attacks because they sit there and no action's able to be taken because of our policies.
No, that's a fair point. Judith, can you add any more to that?
Well, as I said in answer to I think all the councillors got the email when I answered about the eyesore buildings. So, at a certain point in time, an eyesore building may well pass the threshold, or there may be enough complaints and evidence that makes it compelling that it's offensive under the Building Act to become an unsanitary building, and then we can take some action. But it is quite a high threshold. And
So, but I'm getting the sense that there needs to be another regulatory intervention that isn't the dangerous and unsanitary buildings one, but another test, which has to go through a proper bylaw process, which is separate from this.
Yes, well, but there's also Resource Management Act and Health Act powers that, I think some of that stuff has been discussed with you in terms of the barrier sites, buildings issues, the different enforcement options that may be available.
I think that there's just a degree of frustration, as you can hear around the table. We're just reflecting what we hear from the community. People are sick of it. They'd like to see their communities restored to some semblance of order. If not, it's never going to be perfect, but it's we can do better. So, I'm getting the sense that it's not this regulatory framework. This is specifically required under the Buildings Act, and it's something that we're required to do in this format, and we really need to park that issue and deal with it separately. Yeah. All right, so Jamie, would you like to move that? Yep. David, even though you weren't there, would you like to second it? All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much. The next item on the agenda is the council-controlled organisation final statements of intent. This went through the Finance and Performance Committee, Raf?
Yes, this is just a noting paper. Council reviewed the draft statements, had feedback, and then these are just letting us know the final ones. They're on all the company's websites, and it's just a report back. There is some commentary on the major changes from the drafts to the final. That's it.
Yep. So you'd like to move that?
Yep.
Yep. Seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. They're all noted. Sorry, I said before that they would all be written up on the board, and they will be. They will be all written up on the board. Yeah. So I've got Christchurch City Holdings, Christchurch NZ Holdings, V-Base, Civic Building, Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust, Riccarton Bush Trust, Transwaste, New Zealand Local Government Funding Agency and Christchurch Agency for Energy Trust with the relevant councillors who sit on the trust or the board. So, corporate finance report for the period ending 30 June, Raf?
Yep, same again, I'll take the report as read. There's nothing really new in there.
Yep.
Happy to move it.
You'd like to move it, seconded by Andrew. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. Thank you. Summit Road speed limits and crime prevention measures. This went through Committee Committee. Oh, Pauline's just stepped out of the room. Mike, would you like to take over and introduce the item?
So, Summit Road speed limit. So we recently did the Dyers Pass Road, so this is more of a continuation of that along the whole of the Summit Road. So it's around having a hearings panel, appointed a hearings panel to look at those roads that extend from Godley Head through to Gebbies Pass Road for the speeds and also the crime prevention.
Right, and your committee considered this in depth?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So would you like to move it?
Yes.
Would someone like to second it? Phil? Are there any questions here? Sarah?
Thank you. Can I just confirm when the other roads on Banks Peninsula are going to be done? I realise that this is one of the key roads. It's metropolitan. Summit Road gets overlooks the city, crosses 4 community boards and then into Selwyn. But one of the key things that happened from the previous Summit Road issue was that it was very clear that any closing of Summit Road at times would simply relocate boy races and others onto the Inner Harbour Road, for example. And those two roads, Inner Harbour Road and Summit Road, are linked. People do circuits, similar people use them. It's sort of day tripping from Christchurch, that kind of thing. At committee, they mentioned that though the other Banks Peninsula roads were going to be consulted on for lower speed limits as well. My preference would have been to do the Littleton that Inner Harbour side at the same time as Summit Road, but in the absence of that, when is that Inner Harbour stuff going to be done as well?
Just as a quick background to this report's come here because that road across the top covers so many different community boards. What you've got is a delegation of the community boards to make advice, and then you make the decision actually on the speed limits. So that's why we've brought that section. The team will be able to answer the time because we are also looking at the speed limits around Banks Peninsula as well. But are you able to answer the timetable?
Thank you. The main body of the Banks Peninsula Speed Limit Review, which is approximately 70 sites, will be out for consultation in, I say, within 3 weeks. The concern, in particular, with if Gebbies Pass was included along with the Summit Road, is that Gebbies Pass is pretty critical that it also ties in with the proposed changes at Governors Bay Teddington Road and also Charteris Bay Road.
I think you're answering my question from ITE. I know you weren't here at the beginning.
Yeah. So all she wants to know is the timing of when we're going out with the inner
I got past the ITE stuff at the ITE meeting, that's all right.
We are dependent on when the hearings panel date can be set, but the intention is it would be towards the end of this year, 2018, and then the hearing panel process would be, as mentioned in the report, early 2019. So
it was the linking of the Inner Harbour stuff with the Summit Road things. So are there 2 separate hearings panels?
There is a hearings panel proposed for Summit Road. The other is a Part A report to Council, which goes to the Community Board first to hear concerns.
Okay, because it's all within the one area. And the timing on that one, because I'm just concerned the overlap between Summit Road and the Inner Harbour on the Port Hill side are so linked.
The concern with trying to combine them is that they it delays the main body of the Banks Peninsula changes, which we would like in place before the holiday season, so we'd like them in by mid-December. The hearings panel process is not intended to commence till early 2019 for Summit Road. So the risk is we end up holding up the process for that. And also there are a number of roads that come off Gebby's Pass Road that we would like to change at the same time as part of the Banks Peninsula review.
Oh, excellent. So we should have the inner harbour, a lower speed, fingers crossed, before the Summit Road even.
Yes.
Great.
Very good. So I've got it moved and seconded. So did I have a second? Yeah, Phil Clearwater was. Sorry. Yep. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Next item. Yeah, infrastructure, transport and environment. No, sorry, where am I? Infrastructure design standards, sorry. That came also to ITI. Pauline, would you like to introduce this?
Apologies for missing that one.
That's all right.
So the purpose of the infrastructure design standards is to provide the design standard for both council-funded assets and assets that will be vested with the council through processes such as subdivision. So the ITI committee discussed the report, and we're now recommending the council note the approval of the steering group to the revised infrastructure design standard. The steering group has delegated authority. You'll note that there were 120 submissions received. Anyone can submit on the design standards at any time during the year. I believe that's correct. And the design standards are reviewed annually, and the full documents are in a 3-year review program. Currently, these standards relate mainly to horizontal infrastructure standards, but it'll be determined later if the vertical infrastructure standards may be contained and wrapped into a single document together with horizontal. Looking at 3.9, the main changes, staff have assured us if there's any major changes to any of these design standards in any year, they will come to the full council. But these changes are mainly small ones, so the main changes are really typos and clarifications. Although if we look at 3.14, that'll be of interest because it relates to public transport and subdivisions. So developers will now be required to show potential bus routes and bus stops in their plans. And also noting 3.21, addressing the carbon footprint. It's in line with the council's goal to be carbon neutral by 2030, that's in the standards now. And 3.22, which is addressing the zero waste by design. So the tweaking of these standards are intended to deliver safer services and improved well-being to everyone involved, that's contractors, staff, citizens and the environment. So this has been supported by the committee. Have I missed anything else?
Very good. And you'd like to move it?
Oh, happy to move.
And as seconder? Aaron? Right, Tim.
Thank you. I notice a note in 3.14, the subdivision's required to just outline or make sure there's going to be room for buses, etc., public transport in their subdivisions. So is there any requirement for them with our future planning, and I'm thinking of the southwest, with regards to park and ride stations? Because if we are looking at the ongoing pressures on Lincoln Road and the ongoing discussions with four-laning that and the detrimental effect it could have in the Addington Village, one of the things that could solve in that future planning would be the ability to put a park and ride somewhere in that Hallsville area for those people in Lincoln, Prebbleton, Rolleston, Taitapu, Little River, etc., that would not bike in but drive into that area and then bus or public transport into the city. So is there any requirement or any vision for that?
I think from a park and ride point of view, and we've talked about the transport network, it's a big piece of infrastructure that we would probably have to pay rather than being part of a subdivision, because it would serve more than just that subdivision. It would be serving a whole area, and so we're certainly, and I'm not sure who's here, if Richard's here, we're certainly having discussions around, you know, what is the park and ride, but I think it would come up as we would have to purchase land and we would have to go through resource consenting. So it's actually beyond, it's a bit like building a bus interchange. You know, some of those big chunks of infrastructure beyond this. This is more for, it used to be called subdivisional standards, it's expanded out from that, but it's about the standards we want people to build infrastructure to that will transfer into our ownership. So I think park and ride generally is a bit bigger than what's covered in this. May in future, particularly if you're looking at the carbon footprint. Yeah.
There could be a future, so if you know, like Silver Stream in Waimak there, where they're next to their little commercial area, they've got a park and ride there. So it would be similar type of things. So depending on the size of the subdivisions and activities that they're taking, so there's probably, as Dave has indicated, it would be a balance between what we might provide if it's substantial versus a smaller park and ride.
I guess it's along the lines of town planning, in the sense that if you have a park and ride close to a key activity area like Hallsville Shopping Centre or something, it adds value to that community and to those being there, because you've got supermarkets, etc. So rather than going continually to, say, the malls, you can actually add strength to those communities through economic benefit for those. So I guess it's about future planning, and with those subdivisions going around that, it's where do you put it? So there must be some vision at some stage about, because it could be a large area of land, and if it is all given to subdivisions, no one's going to give it up, and it also becomes more expensive for council to purchase if there are subdivisions planned. I'm just thinking future planning. We're talking about it all the time, and we get caught. You know?
And that ties into the district plan as opposed to into these infrastructure design scenes. So that would come through a resource consent process. Now, if there were enough of them coming through, we would then get some standard design that we could put in here. However, I think that planning, that structure, you're dead right, but that is a planning issue rather than a infrastructure design standard issue. But if every subdivision had that condition in it, we would then start putting in, this is our standard design as it is for a bus stop, etc.
Thank you. No, good.
Thank you. Yanni.
I'm really concerned at what appears to be the sort of proliferation of traffic signals through our city. Some intersections, it's really hard to kind of understand the design. You know, there's traffic lights that get put on top of other traffic lights. There's left-hand turning arrows all the way on, right-hand turning arrows on the left furthest corner, which doesn't seem to make much sense. If you're in that lane, you can't actually turn right because you've got 3 lanes of traffic. Are we able to? I don't know how much consideration being given through here around the traffic light designs. Are we able to get like a workshop at least around what the kind of current thinking is about why we're seeing such a proliferation in the number of signals, arrows, versus, you know, I guess what was previously there, and how our design thinking is going?
If I could briefly comment on that one. So again, it's a lifting of the bar within our design space, and that's what the design standard is that we're continually on an annual basis lifting the bar. And when I've chatted to the CTOC guys, what their indications are is that often a single traffic entity going in has obviously a domino effect up and down a road, and we pick that up, for instance, in Manchester Street. And so the idea is that over a period of time we modify them, so we both modify our operation of our signals and obviously the design of our signals. So you're right, Ronnie, from that point of view, that we continuously lift our bar in this process.
We can bring a briefing with the traffic engineers and CTOC to the either the ITI committee or to council regarding traffic and traffic lights. One of the issues you'll find around particularly right turning arrows is because the rule used to be giving way to left turning vehicles, right had the right of way. We have had a number of traffic lights that have, we do lack probably right turning arrows, but we are looking at doing that as part of this road safety provision of that. But certainly we can bring a briefing. If you look at the infrastructure standards, they talk about if you have to put traffic lights in, they become a bespoke design that we specifically approve. So there's no set of rules in there, but there are certain places. A good example I imagine would be Augustin Hallsville Road. There's been a new set of traffic lights that went in as part of that subdivision. Not sure where I can think, but then they were bespokely designed and they had to get signed off by NZTA in that case because it was a highway. Same with the ones out on Yoldhurst.
I think Yanni's more focused on High Street, Chewham Street.
And that's not the infrastructure. That's a separate, totally separate issue.
It's a good issue to raise, though.
But it's not. It's also like where you've got lanes that go straight ahead. You're putting in traffic lights with right turning arrows where the lane can't actually turn. And so, and I know we want to improve, but there doesn't seem to be, some of it seems very illogical, and maybe there's reasons behind that, but I do think having some understanding of why we're seeing such a huge proliferation, just even up on Durham Street, there's about, you know,
I've been generous because I agree with you, but this isn't the report to.
So if this isn't the report to do it,
no, it's not. Infrastructure design standards is what we're dealing with today, not the actual decisions to locate infrastructure in a particular area.
But so how do we deal with it? Because you know, when we get
not
the
in
plans,
this paper,
I understand
not
that.
in this paper. So we'll just park it. We'll find a mechanism to deal with it, but we won't be dealing with it today.
So okay, and then just the other question was, so it's great about the bus routes going through new subdivisions. Are we also requiring like cycleways? Because that's been one of the concerns that people have raised previously, that footpaths and cycleways are not clear through subdivision outline development plans, and therefore we get a lot of debate. I think, you know, there's a classic, the Noble subdivision, where that kind of came up. So
yeah, so you're right, Yanni, from the point of view of active transport, we need to make sure that people feel safe on any road as far as cycling and walking, etc. is concerned. So at the moment we require marking on collector roads and above as far as cycleways are concerned. And that's required from a point of view of when someone actually does a subdivision, they've got to come back and actually show that. And those line markings, we prefer that they actually go down at the time of subdivision. In the past, sometimes they haven't always. But the idea is, again, it's a process that we can improve exactly like with the bus routes as well, and we can actually make sure that all of those areas, the standards are lifted over time. Yeah.
There are cases in subdivisions, and Wigram is a good example, where we have got off-road cycle lanes going through some of the reserves and some of the pathways, so we are doing them. I'm actually seeing what the actual standards actually ask for that, but we do look at that, approving as we approve. We need to approve the final engineering designs under this standard, so we get the opportunity to, if we can, and we've got the opportunity to take them off road, we also do that.
I was just thinking, I just would hope that these actually have a really strong requirement for off-road cycle lanes, link connections to MCRs through the subdivision and design standards, so that we actually, it's the best time to get off-road cycle lanes in. And I'm not, I mean, maybe I've missed it, but some developments don't seem to be doing that.
So that's one of the problems of lots of little subdivisions. Somehow through these standards we have to link those together. So it's something that we'll go away and have a look at and sort of see what we've got in here, and we may be able to integrate it into the next version.
Very good.
Hey, that, not just off-road, that'd be preferable, but if they can't be off-road, then the provision of separated cycle lanes during the planning of the subdivision.
Okay.
Good. All right. Excuse me. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Oh, Sarah's seconded it. Sarah, you're a substitute.
We're having a note for a workshop on traffic lights. Is it correct?
Very good. Okay. Options for upgrading main pumps water supply pump station. Helen Beaumont, Program Manager. Good morning. Do you want to do a sort
brief
of
overview?
A brief overview? That would be fantastic. Thank you.
So this report follows the overview of the water supply program that was reported up to you 9th of August and focuses particularly on main pumps. Now, main pumps down in Beckenham is a critical water supply pump station across the city. It supplies 11% of our central zone and 5% of the water for the city as a whole. We have 6 wells at main pumps, all 6 tapping into Aquifer 1, so that is our shallowest aquifer. The source water there has previously been considered secure, but recent sampling and age testing has cast some doubt on this. We won't be able to confirm the status of that water until we've done further modelling of the aquifer, and that's some 10 to 12 months away. So there are 6 wells, and all 6 wells have below ground well heads which are not considered to be secure. So at the moment we've got chlorination at that pump station, and we're proposing ultraviolet disinfection as an alternative.
When you say not considered to be secure, can I just kind of say not considered to be secure by the engineers who are required to sign them off for meeting drinking water standards compliance?
That's correct. Those wells have all been considered
We've always
compliant
regarded
in the
them
past.
as secure in the past. Thank you.
That's correct. The ultraviolet here is likely to be a permanent installation, even if we do ultimately raise those well heads for other reasons. The alternative to installing ultraviolet at this stage is to simply put this pump station in the queue for raising the well heads and doing that work, or building a new pump station elsewhere. So those alternatives are set out in the report.
Excellent. All right. Okay, questions. So Yanni, Phil.
Thank you for the report. I was just trying to understand, so in terms of history for Christchurch and what UV treatment actually addresses. So I think I've had the response back around protozoa, that we've had no recorded instance of protozoa, and UV is an effective treatment for that.
UV is treatment effective against bacteria, viruses and protozoa.
Right, so that's what I wanted to ask. So for the non-protozoa bacteria and viruses, how many times have we detected those in our water supply?
I think there's been 1 detection at main pumps in 1 well.
Over what time?
Oh, well, looking back over the last 5 years.
Right.
Which is this relevant period to consider.
So in terms of value for money, we're effectively spending a lot of money on something that's happened once in the last 5 years.
We are required, if either the source water or the wellheads are not regarded as secure, we are required to put in a disinfection barrier. So to comply with the New Zealand drinking water standards. So that is a requirement, regardless of the third criterion, which is what you're talking about. It's the detection of E. coli in the water. So there are 3 criteria that we have to satisfy, all 3: the source water, the wellheads, the security of the wellheads, and then the monitoring of E. coli, so the absence of bacteria.
If you look at the drinking water standards, they are based on a risk basis, and this certainly drops the risk quite significantly. It's another barrier, basically, to anything happening, so it gives a surety, but it also has the added advantage that it doesn't add anything to the water. The water comes in the same as it goes out, except it's got all any potential bugs killed.
So just in regards to, and I think I emailed through the Becker report, so the report that came out from government made reference to there'd been I think it was like an over-reliance on using UV to treat water, which was expensive and for risks that were pretty low. And I just wondered if you had any kind of feedback around that kind of comment in terms of the value for money in terms of what we're doing here versus putting this money back into actually bringing the wellheads to a secure status by raising them.
My understanding of the comment in the Becker report was around ultraviolet disinfection being put in place just for protozoa. We're not doing that here. We're doing ultraviolet for bacteria, viruses and protozoa. So in the Becker report, what they were talking about was supplies that were filtering, possibly flocculating and filtering the water, then using UV and then using chlorination treatment as a residual in the reticulation as well. So they were using UV as a built-in braces approach to protozoa, and that's a relatively expensive approach if you have no protozoa.
Okay. And just the final question: if we agree to do this, we're still looking at a time frame of the implementation and then the monitoring, which would be what, about 18 months before we could even get these to be secure?
No, we've started the monitoring. So the monitoring's already started. So we're running these processes in parallel.
So once we get the UV treatment in, I thought there was a time frame where we had to monitor.
No, we do the protozoa monitoring. We've started the protozoa monitoring already. So we will know whether or not there are any protozoa detected in the wells.
So just between now and when the UV treatment gets put in, what time frame are we looking at from today, if we agree to do this, to getting these signed off as being secure?
I would expect the drinking water assessor to sign them off as secure once we have the plant commissioned and operating.
What sort of time?
Well, the report sets that out.
We're
We're proposing June, although we will look at bringing that forward if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Phil.
Thanks, Helen, for that explanation too, and especially around it being the shallowest aquifer in the city. But just from what you've just said too, because my question was really one was similar to Yanni's. So basically, although in fact the monitoring has already started, in terms of, but once the UV is in, there's a good chance that the water authorities, the drinking water, will say, look, it does meet the standards.
Once the UV is in?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm. And so there won't be any long follow-up testing period required?
No, I don't think so.
Right. Thanks, Helen.
Yep. Well, we don't usually test for protozoa, so this is additional testing. Yeah, so we test for E. coli regularly, yes.
Jimmy?
Thank you. But if these are the kind of UV the light, this factory has been installed, has been tested, particular focus on the protozoa, successful, whether we consider to extension to some other the water supply, the pump station or not?
Yes, we are considering using ultraviolet at other pump stations. And we're looking at, we have a number of criteria for considering whether or not we'll put in ultraviolet. One is whether or not they are drawing on the shallowest aquifer, so on aquifer 1, where we may need to add another disinfection barrier. The second one, if the pump station is regularly used, because the ultraviolet light, the lamps don't like being turned off and on, so if the pump station is being regularly used. And then the third one, if we've got space to do it, so that we can put the plant in place. So we're running a ruler across the city at the moment, looking at those options.
Also, particularly mention, installation of at least the UV, the kind of the treatment instrument. You will shut down for the 1 to 2 weeks. They're already done or not yet? You need to shut down, close.
We'll need to shut down the pump station to install it. Yes.
Yeah, already done.
No.
Or not yet?
No.
Not yet. Yeah. What is your plan? Because there's a water supply for 11% for the citywide.
We can cover that. That's no problem at all, especially if we shut it down in a low demand period through the winter.
Okay. Last question. But if option 2, remedial those wellhead, is $1.8 million. That's for all, citywide, or still just part of the wellhead?
For those, it's for all 6 wells at main pumps. That remediation, okay. All 6 wells at main pumps, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a correction on that, it's 11% of the zone, it's 5% of the city. So just to put that into, so 11% of the zone that it contributes to, 5%.
So Phil, did you have a question? I wrote your name down. Yeah.
You asked it? I was fine. Yanni had asked some of the other questions I wasn't asked.
Oh, right, okay, that's good.
Sorry, you mean the 11%?
11% of the zone, because the zone's 185,000.
5% of the city is about.
So the zone was 185,000 people, right?
We've got 400,000. They're trying to do the sums. It's about 20,000 people. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Brad.
Thanks, Helen. Seems to me here the main driver here is the concern about the Aquifer 1 water status. Can you just talk a little bit more about that compared to some of the other aquifer zones around the city, and what the council's current position has been with respect to the quality of different aquifer water?
Yes, so aquifer 1 is the aquifer that is the shallowest aquifer. So in the west of the city, that is semi-confined or unconfined down to aquifer 1. In the east of the city, it's reasonably well confined down to Aquifer 1, and Aquifer 1 has performed very well for us. And at main pumps it provides a lot of water. All the previous sampling and age testing for Aquifer 1 at main pumps has deemed that water to be sufficiently old to be regarded as secure, but the more recent testing, particularly of the water chemistries, shows some variability, and so we are no longer as certain of the secure status of Aquifer 1 at that site. So it does depend on where you are in the city in terms of which aquifer you're tapping into. The lower aquifers, so 2, 3, 4 and 5, are all regarded as secure, and the age testing confirms that.
Aquifer 1 testing that we do, there's things on age, and some of it's showing that it's still 150 years old water. We also look at what is the percentage of water that's under 1 year old, and the drinking water standard talks about 0.005. I hope I've got the right percent. I think I've got the right number of zeros in there. So very, very little, and they do comply with that. But as Helen says, there's been a change in chemistry. Some of it actually has got older since we tested. We did a real rigorous testing in 2005. Some of it's got older for some reason, and so they're saying there's enough variability that they're actually re-looking at some of the data and the detail to give us are very clear. Some of it they're saying fine, Aquifer 1 absolutely secure, it aligns with the previous results, there's no change, whatever. And maybe some of this has happened because of changes in the earthquake. You know, you may have had aquifers that have slightly shifted, who knows, and so they're doing a bit more work on that. So we are following that up, and I'm not sure if we've got a timetable of 10 months. Okay.
So in terms of taking the approach that we are taking around the city of raising the wellheads, you're suggesting UV because you think there's a potential, though we don't know yet, downgrading of that Aquifer 1 water supply?
Yes.
And you're saying that we shouldn't, it doesn't make sense to wait until we have those results?
Otherwise we'd have to raise the wellheads.
Well, we will probably raise the wellheads anyway, ultimately, but they'll go to the back of the queue in terms of that, because for health and safety reasons and ease of maintenance and all sorts of other things, we will raise them and bring them up to best practice, but we can defer that probably 3 or 4 years. One of the other drivers for putting UV disinfection in is that as an alternative to chlorination, so we can take chlorination out of that pump station.
Okay.
Dion, then David. You're happy, David?
Just clarifying with the Aquifer 1 wells at Mains pump station. So you're saying that putting a UV system in now will get us secure status for those wells, but if in 4 years' time we ultimately raise the wellheads, does that UV then become obsolete, or would we continue using it?
No. Well, it depends on the results of the groundwater modelling and what happens with Aquifer 1. If it's not regarded as secure, even if the wellheads are secure, we will still need some sort of disinfection. So we have to meet all 3 criteria: the source water, the security of the wellheads, and the absence of E. coli.
All I would say also is that drinking water is based on multiple barriers, so it is another barrier that in case something goes wrong, it's a bit like the lining up of the holes in the cheese basically. If you've got all these barriers, something change happens, we probably would use that infrastructure until it at least ran out of its useful life. So, you know, I think we would be looking at that because it just is another barrier that gives us assurance. Admittedly, it's getting an infinitesimal risk down to an absolute infinitesimally little a risk, but
that is the trouble. I mean, it seems to me that people forget what risk is. You know that you know, because what we're talking about here is you know, the chances of it happening are rare, but the consequences of it happening are severe. So you can never, and I think sometimes people conflate the two issues and talk about risk when they're really talking about likelihood. So, and that's slightly different matter, but probably a bigger conversation than for today. Dion.
Yeah, I will ask what I was thinking about before. The wells that we've got in the aquifers, the city council or the city is the only one that draws from the deep aquifers. Is that right?
No, other people can draw from the deep aquifers as well.
With
so
consent.
With the
consent. So they need a consent from Environment Canterbury.
So do any others have them from the deep wells at the moment, or the deep aquifers? They do, but there's a lot more that will be drawing it from the shallower aquifer one.
I'd have to check with Environment Canterbury what the distribution was, but there are a number of people drawing on the deeper aquifers as well.
Oh, I thought they were actually.
We are the biggest user of the aquifer system.
Yeah.
By far. But there are other significant users.
There's certainly, into all aquifers, there are other users other than council.
And so I mean, for those shallower aquifers anyway, is there much, well, for the people that are using the other, or drawing water from the aquifer, and they don't have proper backflow measures, is that a risk to us as well?
So they are required to have backflow measures, and those are audited as well. And the one of the joys of the Christchurch system is that most of it's artesian. So the water is being forced up, and it's, if you like, it's almost a natural backflow prevention mechanism.
All right. Yes, Rev.
Yeah, just sort of a follow-up actually. I mean, how many pumps do we have drawing water from Aquifer 1?
We have 17 wells in Aquifer 1 from memory. I'm looking at John in case he can remember the exact number, but it's approximately 17 out of Aquifer 1.
And
sorry?
Help yourself.
How many pump stations? I'll have to come back to you on that, sorry.
Just to give you an idea, they're principally sitting underneath the Port Hills or alongside the foothills of the Port Hills because there's no deeper aquifers at that point in time. That's why they're slightly different to the aquifer ones that we decided that we'd do away with in the northwest because we had alternatives of deeper aquifers. But because of the Port Hills and the way the rocks come down, there is only Aquifer 1. So if we decided to abandon main pump station, for example, we would need to relocate it somewhere else because there's no alternative, my understanding, at main pumps to go down to Aquifer 2, 3, 4 because it doesn't exist in the geology at that point.
Yeah, so my question was, so those 7 other pump stations, how are we treating those?
Those other pump stations?
In terms of, are we raising wellheads? What's the status of those?
So it's a mix. So at the moment, those are being, have chlorine added, and most of them we're raising the wellheads. But when we do the age testing of Aquifer 1, it's not Aquifer 1 in any one place. It's Aquifer 1 moving west to east across the city. So in the west we know it's not secure and that there are surface influences and we've deepened all those wells. In the east, many of those wells may well comply. So it depends on the age testing and the water chemistry testing as to how much risk there is that they won't comply in the future. So we're looking at that.
I can distribute a paper that was based on the 205 results, which shows you the line where Aquifer 1 is considered at that point secure and unsecure, and I have circulated, I thought I'd circulated to all the councillors, but I can certainly circulate that map that gives you that line that shows where Aquifer 1 is considered based on the 205, and so I've got to put that proviso on, and all the pump stations that we've got in Aquifer 1 at that time were secured, apart from the northwest ones, which you've already addressed.
So that was known in 2005?
We were doing 205. Those were the last time we did a full analysis of age, and we agreed with the drinking water assessor that we didn't need to, well, we shouldn't do it until the geology had settled down after the earthquake, and that's why we're doing that work.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but are you saying that the northwest shallow bores were identified in 2005? Because they weren't brought to our attention until the Havelock North incident happened.
The 205, at that time, they were showing no transgressions on E. coli's and whatever, so no, there was no issues raised with those wells.
No, I'm not talking about the transgressions, I'm talking about requirement number 1, which is the age of the water, the security of the water.
I would have to go back and have a look at those results. There was a
I thought you said
yeah.
that the 2005 report showed that it moved across the city.
There's a line showing of the secure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a
yeah.
physical line, so it's a physical line which shows where the confining layers
Correct.
begin for Aquifer 1 in the east.
Right.
So that's not necessarily exactly the same thing as age testing and security, but is related.
Right. Okay.
So, Liam, I think that from memory that the northwest bore was in the program to be re-drilled deeper, but after Havelock North we accelerated that.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
And that program being signed off by the drinking water assessor, but yes, it was an acceleration program.
So it may assist. I've got the short list of other stations that we're looking at ultraviolet for. So this is a preliminary shortlist and it will change. So some will come off and others will go on. But they include Spraydon, Mays, Redwood, Belfast and Thorrington. So those are, they all have wells into Aquifer 1.
All right. Yanni.
Wanted to pick up on, in the report that we've got attached, it says under 9, this is on page 163, there is opportunity under the current Health Act to be deemed to comply fully with DWSNZ without necessarily meeting its technical requirements. This requires the water safety plan is approved by the local drinking water assessor. Then it goes on to touch on that we could agree to a different approach. So can you just give us some sense of what conversations have been had with the drinking water assessor and where things are at in terms of our water safety plan?
Sorry, what paragraph are you looking at?
It's page 163. It's 9 and then the paragraph just under it. I mean, I'm really just trying to understand the drinking water assessor, you know, in terms of where they're at, in terms of a level of comfort, because it seems to me apparent that when we want to remove chlorine from our water, we're not going to have secure status signed off by the engineers for all of our wellheads.
Well, we may well do. Look, don't end a project before we've even got to the sort of final consideration of it.
Right.
The point is that if we can get enough water into the system that isn't chlorinated and can maintain that through the summer, we can turn off the chlorine. So that's what we're focused on. We're focused on it 100%. Everyone's giving their all, and I don't think that it's necessary to focus on, you know.
Okay, I was just trying to understand, given the level of expenditure, and given you've said that, I think these would go to the back of the queue to be raised to be secure for best practice, and that might be 3 to 4 years. So we're really talking about possibly spending $2 million for you know, 2-3
Point of order
years.
though, Dave's already addressed that by saying that it actually adds another multiple barrier, which is a good thing. So it's not wasted work at all. Think of the Swiss cheese, it's a really good analogy. So the more barriers we have, the better, the more secure, the safer our water
Well,
is.
possibly, except, and I don't think that's a point of order, that's a point of debate, but, you know, the biggest, one of the biggest
Look,
risks we
can I
face
just
is the
not
reticulation
have
network.
people arguing with each other around the table? I can manage the meeting myself. So
I can answer the question about the drinking water assessor. So
And
we
the
have
water
a
assessor.
regular monthly meeting with the drinking water assessor, which is about an overview of the program and raising any issues that either we or the drinking water assessor have with the program and any questions. And we also have regular technical meetings on individual pump stations and individual proposals to ensure that the drinking water assessor understands what the proposal is and is in agreement with what our plans are in terms of compliance with drinking water standards.
In the report that we've got, it says that we could go to the drinking water assessor with a water safety plan and
we
agree.
have a water safety plan
okay, so
already
you're asking
signed off by the drinking water assessor. We've got one, and if you, well, anyway.
So is that specifically around the hazardous, the potential for hazardous substances at that site?
I don't know what it is. It's just in the summary where it kind of indicates that we wouldn't need to meet all the technical requirements of the drinking water standards. E.g., we may not have to put UV in if we agreed the water safety plan with the drinking water assessor. I'm just trying to understand the likelihood of that what if there's a process underway to kind of present to the drinking water assessor, here's our water safety plan, and here's X, Y, Z.
The water safety plan is already signed off.
We have a water safety
That's
plan,
one of the many differences, as Helen pointed out in her last report, that between us and Havelock North.
Sorry,
they didn't have a signed off water safety plan. We
sorry,
had.
I'm just trying to understand. So if we've got a drinking water,
He's taken one line in the report that is attached to support the concept of UV treatment as opposed to chlorination.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about the report from the consultant?
Correct.
Yes,
I found it.
Okay. So that was simply to support the alternative disinfections. It's not to do with what we're proposing at main pumps.
Correct.
It's a more general statement about an approach.
so there's no chance that the drinking water assessor could agree to a water safety plan that didn't include UV?
Yes, there is, and that would be to chlorinate.
And it would be
or to
chlorination.
use ozone treatment or some other treatment. But what we're proposing as the preferred option is ultraviolet. So we have to have some sort of disinfection in at this pump station.
But if you're so enamoured of the report, Yanni, the next sentence says, although there is opportunity to agree a different approach with the DWA and encapsulate this in a water safety plan, there is a risk associated with this as the DWA's approval could be withdrawn at any time. This could result in any alternative solutions suddenly becoming non-compliant, as they would require upgrades or extensions to comply. Based on our assessment, we do not believe that there are any additional treatment options that should be explored further at present, as these will either not demonstrate compliance or will be very expensive and slow to implement. The most attractive alternative to the interim chlorination system is UV disinfection. So, I mean, I don't know how clearer it could be.
So I wonder if I could clarify what the consultant is saying is that he has assessed a number of alternative disinfection systems, and there are others out there that he hasn't assessed, but they are not systems that are approved, if you like, under the guidelines that are available for
and they're
drinking water standards.
unpronounceable, and they're on page
I
162.
get all that.
Coagulation and direct sand filtration.
Well, and there are others.
Slow sand filtration, cartridge filtration, and bag filtration.
What I don't, so I get that. I totally understand.
Okay.
You know that the UV, in terms of all the assessment, that's a great approach to meet all the technical requirements. What I don't get, and the first time that I've heard, is that we don't need to meet all the technical requirements if we can get a water safety plan agreed with the drinking water assessor.
No, I don't think that's quite what it's saying. I think what it's saying is that you could come up with something completely novel, a completely novel water treatment that is not anticipated by the drinking water standards and is not covered by any of the present guidelines. You could document that in your water safety plan. You could demonstrate that it reduces the risk adequately and get that signed off by the drinking water assessor. That is possible.
And she could withdraw that at any time.
There's a very difficult and long approach, but it is a possible approach. So yes, we could explore other alternatives.
Yeah. Phil. All right. So, Anne, do you have another question? You'd like to move it, and seconded by. Right, moved by Anne and seconded by Pauline. Is there any discussion? Phil?
Look, I think this discussion has been really valuable because clearly the questions raised and with really clear answers, it is what I think the most complex issue that we at Council are dealing with. And I do thank the staff for the clarity of the report, and especially because, you know, we've always known, I guess, that the Aquifer 1, the shallowest aquifer, has potentially had some issues. And I think it's good that we are being updated with the recent water research. And I think the report points to some real gains by using the UV system around these pumps, and that the UV system treats both the bacteria and protozoa. We know there's no silver bullet, and as David has indicated to us, having that multi-barrier approach will really assist us to get our water standards compliant. And I think this is so important because I think Leanne alluded to what happened at Havelock North, and the consequences if we don't make sure of the security of our water. So we cannot be complacent. We cannot wait to get every sort of answer. We need to build on the different interventions that are being made. So, and I think it's clear though that in fact at a general level, we as a council have already said to staff, look, we do want you to progress and look at the delivery of these alternative systems and works so that we can improve the wellheads, and it included in installing ultraviolet. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations today.
Great. The Spark CEO Simon Mouter often talks of no plan B, and I think that's one thing I disagree with him on, because I always want to have a plan B. And I think when it comes to our drinking water, we need to be in a position to not only return to clean, pure, safe and secure water in Christchurch, but we need to ensure that once it's gone, it remains gone. I think the UV treatment technology not only moves us closer to that goal in the short term, and ensuring that our water will be chlorine-free for more people, but if there's ever a will or a push for widespread chlorination, be that likely or unlikely in the future, we'll be in a far better position to be able to push back from that as we have a genuine alternative to chemical treatment. I think this is a pragmatic move that will hold us in good stead. It's a win in the short term, it's a win in the long term, and I see it as a really pragmatic approach to mitigate against the so-called holes of the Swiss cheese aligning in the future. So very supportive.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, to me, the drinking water standard is very crucial. We are all aware, but it's kind of two different the way. One is we chlorinate the water, but we are all aware the people, particular concern chlorinate, especially recently we are all aware. For those kind of the water, the particular hot water, the cylinder, they have caused corrosion, etc. Quite a few. Even I myself, I heard quite a few in my area, especially the old community. The other one is new innovation. This UV kind of is a new innovation technology UV treatment. Even a moment is in the testing stage, but well approved can be the kind of dealing with those protozoa and also to dealing with the bacteria, etc. But at least there's no any those coordination of water can be eased. So if we compare these two, and also if we review the option 1 and option 2, but option 1 is is UV treatment and can to 11% for the water supply. And also know the coordination of water, we can go ahead. But option 2, particular disadvantage in here, they particular mention, consider timing, because while if, the groundwater modeling during early 2019 showed that aquifer 1 is not the secure, then this UV treatment still required. So, but regarding timing, they will delay for another the 6 months, etc. So I think probably this good the optimistic option 1. So I support the option 1 to go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, look, just very quickly, because I know that we're all in agreement on this, but look, I really want to congratulate Helen and the team there for exploring these fiscally prudent options and for making these recommendations today. We know how complex the situation is. We see different options for different pump stations at different aquifers with different wellheads. We've got a short-term and long-term program of work, and our eye is firmly on that goal of removing this chlorine as quickly as possible, and I think we're heading down that track really well. So, it's amazing work that you're doing. Your reports are incredibly clear, although they're complex. Once I've read them about 100 times, I think I can almost follow them. So, thank you, and I'm very supportive.
Sarah?
Thank you. finding myself in the position of having something longer that I'm going to cut completely because Jamie said it all. So just quickly to summarise, getting this started now gets the chlorine out sooner, and having UV in place at main pumps is a key part of our arsenal should we need to battle for an exemption.
Right. Well, I'm just gonna say one thing quickly as well, and I just want to remind people all the time when we consider this matter that there are very explicit differences between Christchurch and Havelock North, and there has been, in my view, a very strong reaction, and I would say overreaction to what's happened in Havelock North. It is a reminder of the severity of the consequences, and we do support the underlying thesis, which is it's our obligation to supply safe water. So we absolutely support the Minister when the Minister says we want demonstrably safe water. But the idea of residual disinfection as a mechanism, when we know from reading the reports, Havelock North reports, that chlorination is not an absolute barrier. And in some instances, you could say that it breeds complacency. And if there's one thing that you could never accuse the Christchurch City Council of in regard to its water is complacency. We know we have a valuable resource. And in some way, although this has been a wake-up call of incredible proportions, it is a reminder to people how precious our water supply is, and it is really a call to action that goes beyond this table. And I was at a meeting the other night, and that was very much the message that was received, that we're in this together and we can protect our water supply if we are to keep to the winter levels, and we'll get things done more quickly. But I just want to remind people that in the Christchurch Havelock North contest, they did not learn lessons from the previous outbreak. We have consistently looked at the approach. That wellhead or the re-drilling in the northwest, that began in 2012. That was before Havelock North, and we fast-tracked it as soon as the Havelock North incident happened in order to create a safer environment as quickly as we could. Their aquifer was not confined. We've already heard a really good explanation of our aquifer system. They had a high transgression history. We don't have the transgression history that they have, and poor working relationships between the council and their regional council was demonstrably a contributing factor to the situation that they were confronted with, and that is not the case here. And they didn't have a water safety plan signed off, which we do. So, I think that, again, I'd like to just repeat what Pauline said and congratulate the team. You're doing a fantastic job, and keep going. Anne.
Basically repeating a lot of what's been said, but it's clear that permanent installation of ultraviolet treatment system at main pumps water supply pump station is an obvious solution. Ultraviolet disinfection is an effective alternative to chlorination for the Christchurch water supply. Ultraviolet disinfection is technically feasible, can be implemented in a timely fashion, and is cost effective for main pumps. And most importantly, once the UV system has been installed and commissioned, chlorination can cease at one of the city's largest pump stations. There is strong evidence that UV treatment delivers safe drinking water. The Netherlands approach to treating water proves that the multi-barrier approach, which includes UV, is successful. They don't use chlorine at all, and unlike the US and UK, who do and have had 4 to 5 times the rate of waterborne disease than the Netherlands. So our initial challenge was to protect our vulnerable residents as we faced the risk that our water supply might not be safe. We responded quickly and effectively with temporary chlorination. And as we face, there's another challenge that we face, the possibility of central government requiring us to chlorinate. And we have this opportunity now to prove that we are more than capable of managing our own affairs when it comes to delivering safe drinking water without chemicals. Here is just another opportunity for Christchurch to lead the way in innovation and sustainability. So totally supporting staff recommendation here today.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Now we've got 2 more items on the agenda for this part of the meeting. So I'm going to propose that we just take 10 minutes and people get a cup of coffee, and we'll start back at 11:30. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Canterbury Sports Limited 466 to 482 Yaldhurst Road approval of the final Section 71 proposal under the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act. And this went to no committee, so it's just coming straight here. So Vicky would like to move it and Aaron would like to second it.
I'll move it. Thank you, Vicky.
Okay, Aaron's moved it, Vicky seconded it, and it's now open for questions. Is there any discussion? Yep.
Page 199 4.6.3 talks about the impact on the existing and planned recreational facility network. I'm just curious because obviously the Hornby pool has been delayed, and I just wonder why we would stop private company actually looking at creating an aquatic centre that would actually take casual recreation and actually reduce the impact on council.
That is really based on the spaces and places assessment, which is a plan done by Sports New Zealand, who have outlined what facilities we need, including post-earthquake and including the areas which are being developed and more populated. And the conclusion was that we have more than enough aquatic facilities in Christchurch to meet our needs in the short and medium term. Another aquatic facility would be required in about 10 to 20 years. Now, allowing another large aquatic facility on Yaldhurst, in the Yaldhurst facility could potentially mean effects on our own facilities in terms of taking clients away and making them unsustainable.
So, but at the moment we haven't actually built the Hornby pool and it's actually been pushed back even further. So technically we could say, actually, we may not need the Hornby pool because we got, obviously the Rollston's got a very large aquatic centre.
Mm-hmm.
And
thank you, that's not the item that we're addressing today.
Very large aquatic centre in just around the corner in Yaldhurst Road.
Well, the Spaces and Places plan takes into account Hornby as a proposed plan, meaning the council has committed to it in terms of long-term plan and finances. So that is taken as a facility that is going to happen, or, you know, albeit it's not built yet.
Okay. So I guess the key thing is though that actually we don't want to, I think, stop private companies actually providing facilities for Christchurch residents just so we can build them and operate them. That's
no, but also we don't want to create a conflict between our facilities and theirs, and the idea is that we're not trying to stop them from having an aquatic facility. What we are saying is that you initially were indicating to us that you really want the facility for athletes to train and compete in, which is fine. But as soon as they start, you know, letting the general public in and learn to swim lessons, then all of a sudden the adjoining facilities that we run might be running into loss.
Yeah, I totally agree with what we currently run. I guess it's just more of a question if they were going to do it, then we could say, hang on, we don't need to build something else for millions of
yes.
things.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yanni.
I mean, I was kind of struck by that as well, given that we don't place that same restriction on a number of private swimming providers that have opened up in this area. We don't provide it on malls when they expand, having gyms, for example. So why would we do it for this one and we haven't done it for others?
Well, it's the other private facilities that we have currently in Christchurch. Obviously, we're filling a need. That one, as the Spaces and Places plan indicates, is not really going to fill an identified need or fulfill a need. It's surplus at the moment. In another 10, 15 years, it may well be that the population growth and the growing need will make that facility necessary to meet the demand of a particular area or a particular generational group. But at the moment, it potentially could spell trouble for our own facilities. if it was open to the general public.
I understand the concern around it competing with our own facilities, but what I can't see is the consistency with the logic that we've enabled all these other gyms to open up in the city next to our facilities. We've allowed shopping malls to expand that include gyms within them. We've allowed, and I don't know what consenting it goes through, but there's been a whole bunch of new private providers in terms of swimming lessons, for example, in some areas of the city. So I just don't quite understand why we would place one restriction on this and not have that same restriction on the others, and how that's actually fair to the public, who obviously would want to make a choice about where they might choose to go. If you lived like in Yildhurst, you might want to go to the pool that's closest to you rather than travel halfway across the city to go somewhere now.
Again, the same reasons really. All the private facilities that you're talking about that are providing swimming lessons or just general recreation have been taken into account in the Spaces and Places plan. So they obviously existed before the plan was drafted, and it's very recent. It was finalised at the beginning of this year. So it takes into account what is actually on the ground and what is being planned or proposed. Planned meaning, whether it's us or other private bodies are committed to it financially, or planned like Yildhurst, that's still in the planning and not committed stages. So in that context, that particular aquatic facility is surplus. And we're not saying that it's going to be surplus forever. It may well fulfill the need that arises in 10 years' time.
So can I just a process question? If we're not happy with that being in there, are we able to move an amendment that it gets removed? And if so, what's the time to do that?
Well, we wouldn't be able to get it removed if it's built. We can impose perhaps, we probably wouldn't be able to impose any further restrictions. At the moment, what the rules are proposing to do is to restrict the use of that facility to sports training and competition. So we're not saying it cannot be built, we're saying it should be used for sports purposes rather than the general recreation.
So we've been through a process of discussing this with CSL and strategic partners and other interested parties, and they've agreed and are happy with what we have here. So we wouldn't be wanting to go back and reopening.
I just wonder whether staff wanted to provide some commentary on the need for the plan to be aligned with the purposes of the Act, including the regeneration purposes of the Act, which is one of the restrictions, and likewise commentary on the likelihood and the assessed priority of any aquatic facilities.
Yes, that's another aspect of the process that we are putting this proposal through. The Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act requires us to assess whether there is an existing need for the proposal and whether it meets the purpose of the Regeneration Act, which is quite specific in what tests it requires the proposal to meet. And one of those tests is the test of the need. And naturally, while there is an identified need for other facilities on the Yildhurst Recreation Centre, there is definitely no need that can be supported for aquatic facilities, hence that restriction. However, in terms of gyms, indoor stadia, or football facilities, there is definitely an identified unfulfilled need for them in the city.
Just so I'm clear, so even though we're being asked to approve it today, we can't make changes to it, or we can?
No, because then it would have to go back through the whole consultation process again. We're in a process. Okay. We signed this off. It's been consulted with Regenerate Christchurch, DPMC, NZTA, and affected neighbours, and this has been, and they've worked through with CSL directly. Yep. Yes. So everyone's kind of signed off on it, and the minister will now be required, if we send this to her, the minister will be, the minister will be required to publicly notify it and receive submissions from the public on it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I don't want to slow this down. It's already taken a long time.
Yeah.
But I just think it would be good to get some advice around the impact on our current facilities, because I just want us to be consistent, and also the feedback I've had from people like with Jelly Park is that, or Graham Condon, is that people, actually there's not a lot of space, they're running at really full capacity, so I personally just can't understand
Yeah, but what you have heard staff explain very clearly is that they take into account the future build as well that we have committed to on our LTP. Sarah.
Thank you. Just a really minor wording question that might be like a technical legal thing. On page 22 of your thing, which is 241 of our agenda, so 18.10.27b2, it says for an aquatic facility, where the use is not permitted at an aquatic facility on the site would impact the sustainability of it. I'm just wondering if the word not needs to be there, because it's the it's potential uses.
You're talking about a rule, 18
page 22, so 18.10.27.
10.27.
18.10.27, yes, and which sentence are
It's just that where the use is not permitted at an aquatic facility would impact the sustainability of, but surely it's whether any uses of the facility would impact.
Well, no, because the rules are actually not permitting certain uses, so that's the assessment matters are referring to a potential resource consent where the proposed what would be proposed is basically the uses that are not permitted by the rules. So whether those not permitted uses would actually impact on...
Okay, so the not permitted is the district plan term, as opposed to just generally not permitted.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Just checking. Just read funny. I stayed away from there, so... Aye. Reads really funny. Is that? I didn't click that it was district plan wording.